Ahead of this year's Louisiana legislative session, one representative is proposing two House bills that would expand marijuana access.
Maddie Kurth explains the proposals and why they may face an uphill battle.
The medical marijuana market is growing in Metairie, one drugstore opening a second location filling prescriptions, all products regulated under state laws.
A kid who's having problems with autism or somebody who's having pain or PTSD or anxiety, you're getting the same dosage each and every time versus when you're getting from other sources, you don't know what you're getting.
But is the state ready to open the gates beyond medicinal use? State Representative Candace Newell is proposing two bills to the House this session. One would issue 10 licenses across the state to cultivate recreational marijuana and 40 permits for businesses to sell it. The second proposal would decriminalize possession and distribution once a set of regulations and taxes are in place.
Louisiana is a majority conservative state. The legislature is getting more conservative, so they're not going to be eager for full legalization of recreational marijuana, but societal norms are sure changing, and we're seeing that in more and more legislation getting closer to passage each session.
State Representative Kyle Green says he looks forward to debating Newell's bills and voting in favor should they reach the House floor. He says that would then open a conversation of expanding the market even further.
You would have an increased demand, so it'd be hard for me not to see a situation where we wouldn't increase the number of licenses or growers of marijuana.
Meanwhile, Governor John Bel Edwards and most lawmakers have opposed efforts to legalize recreational marijuana.
Now, THC products sold as Delta 8 and Delta 9 are another issue likely to come up this legislative session. According to our partners at the Louisiana Illuminator, the governor says residents will see a clampdown on those products that may have been made legal accidentally with a law regarding hemp.